Welcome to your Surgery Connect training. Surgery Connect is a voice over internet protocol system based on cloud telephony, which will mean from the front end, your practice will have no line capacity issues. Even if 100 patients were to call at once, every single one of them is answered by the system. Nobody gets the engaged tone, and then they'll all go into the queue that's built specifically for your particular practice. Within the queue, the patients get their queue position so they know how many people have got to be answered before they are. There's also the option of adding in patient callback, which is our automated callback system, and will then place the patient in a virtual queue so that they can put the phone down. And then when they would have reached the front of the queue, the system will automatically call the patient back and connect the call to the receptionist. There's also no capacity limit on outbound calls on this system, so if you need to make an outbound call, even when it's busy with inbound calls from patients, you'll always be able to do that. Through the user console that you can have open on your screen, you'll be able to see who's logged into the system and whether they're available for a call. So if you're transferring calls around the practice, that's a really useful screen. You'll be able to see whether a user is logged in and whether they're already on the phone or whether they've marked themselves as away from the desk before you go to transfer the call. You'll also be able to see all the calls that you deal with through the practice and some efficiency statistics for the day as well. If you're not interested in those though, they can be removed from your user console screen. All the calls on Surgery Connect are recorded, so both inbound and outbound calls are recorded as a default, regardless of the device that's used. So this system is clever enough to send your calls to different phones depending on how you're working, and it doesn't matter where the call ends up, so long as it's gone through Surgery Connect, it will be recorded for you. You can also switch from audio to video during a call. So something particularly useful if you're doing phone consultations with patients, which means that if they say they have a rash, you can then convert that call to a video call during the call. You send out an automated text from the system. So long as the patient's on their mobile phone and you're using our on-screen Softphone, you'll be able to send that text out and the patient can just click on the link as there's no extra apps for them to download. Once they've said yes to using the camera on their smartphone and yes to the video call, the audio call will automatically end on your screen and then the video call will be ringing from the patient for you. You can also work remotely more easily using Surgery Connect, so it doesn't really matter whereabouts you sit within the practice, whichever phone you log into will become your extension number, and that's then where all your calls will go through to. You can also access Surgery Connect anywhere where you can access the internet, though. So you can log in via a website and access the phone system as though you were in the practice, still using your internal short dials to transfer calls around, and patients don't know any difference at all. The main thing to think about on Surgery Connect is actually users rather than phones. So if your surgery has phones installed, they won't have their own extension numbers. It will rely on a user logging into the phone to give it their short dial number. So each user on Surgery Connect will have their own internal short dial. So that will be an extension number that's specific for you and will follow you around no matter where you log in to Surgery Connect. We can also make numbers direct dial. So if you've got people that need to contact you directly, they can do. And again, those numbers will follow you around no matter where you log in. There'll also be groups set up on the system, and those groups have their own internal short dial number. So if you would rather use the group number rather than the individual, that will then go through to whoever's next available in that team to take that call. And that's normally how your patient calls will be distributed as well. So they'll ring the main practice number, they'll go through a call flow that will be set up before you go live, and that will give the patient some information and may also ask them to choose what sort of thing it is that they're calling about. So typically that would be things like appointments, prescription queries, or test results. Once the patient's queued for the relevant team that answers those queries, as the call reaches the front of the queue, it will look around the group, see who's logged in and who's been waiting for a call the longest, and it will ring that person's phone first. It rings your phone for about 30 seconds, and if you don't answer, it will then move on to the next person within the team to answer that call. So it will ring round everybody within a group, but it's going to do it one person at a time. Now, if you're available when that call comes in and you answer the call, the first thing you'll hear on Surgery Connect is a voice from the system that we call a whisper that tells you what this call should be about. So if it's a patient callback call that you're answering, it's going to say contacting caller as the call's presented. If it's a call to your internal short dial or a direct dial number that you have, it will say direct call as you answer the phone. And if it's a call through one of the groups, it will tell you the name of the group. So it may say appointments call or prescription queries call or test results call, depending on which groups you have set up and which groups you're a member of to answer those calls through. Once you've had the whisper, that's when you can then speak and the caller can then hear you. And it doesn't matter where those calls are answered. So if you are in the practice and using one of the desk phones, then you can log into the phone and all of your calls will then go through that phone that you're logged into. Alternatively, you could use the on-screen Softphone, and that would then mean that you can receive your calls directly through the PC or laptop that you're logged into. You can also use a USB headset plugged into the PC or laptop for all of the call audio using the Softphone application.
To log into the T31, click on the flashing red button next to the tab that says Login. This will then give you a search facility where you can use the numeric keypad to enter the letters of your name. Click on Submit and that will search the list. You can then use the select button under the screen or in the navigation keys in order to select the entry and log in to the phone. To log into the T31, use the flashing red button next to the tab that says Login. This will then give you a list of the users that can use this phone. You can use the navigation keys to scroll up and down through that list until you find your name and then either select on the screen or by using the button in the middle of the navigation keys. Use a headset with the T31. Make sure a headset is plugged in to the left hand side of the phone just above where the handset plugs in and then select the headset button from the hard keys. This will change the icon at the top left hand corner of the screen to a headset rather than a phone. If you want to use the handset on the phone, press the headset button again and the icon will swap back to a phone. When a call comes through, it will show ringing on the screen and show you the number that's calling through. You then have answer or reject buttons at the bottom of the screen. If you're not using a headset and you press the answer key, that will put the call through speakerphone. If you want to answer the call using the handset, pick up the handset from the cradle. That will then answer the call and you'll hear a whisper telling you how that call came through to your extension. If you need to leave your desk to stop calls being presented when you're not there, you can use the Do Not Disturb function. This can be found on the soft keys at the bottom of the screen and will say Go DND. Pressing the DND button will change the status on the screen of the phone and mean that no calls can now come through to your extension number. When you're ready to receive calls again, use the same button, which is now marked Go Available, and that will put you back into available status. To put a call on hold whilst on a call, use the button marked Hold. Whilst they're on hold, the caller will be listening to music so they know they've not been disconnected, and you now have a new button marked as Resume. Use this button to go back into the call so that you're able to carry on your conversation. To transfer a call, use the hard key for the transfer. That's the one that looks like a phone to phone. When you click on the transfer button, it will automatically put the call on hold whilst you then dial a second number. That number can either be internal or external. Once the person answers, you can explain why you're putting the patient through, and then when you're ready, press the transfer button again to complete the transfer. When transferring a call, if you need to retrieve your original call, once you press transfer and dial the number, if nobody answers, you'll need to use the End Call button to end the outbound part of the call. Your screen will then refresh and your original call is currently held, so you can now use the Resume button to go back into the call. Whilst on a call, to pause the recording, use the button at the bottom of the screen marked PREC. You'll then hear a voice telling you the recording has been paused.
Recording has been paused.
To resume the recording, use the same button again, and the voice will tell you the recording has been resumed.
Recording has been resumed.
If you don't restart the recording by the end of the call, your next call will be recorded as part of the normal process, so it resets after each call for you. If you need to bring in a third person on this call, you can use the conference facility. That's shown by a soft key when you're actually on the call. Pressing the conference button will put the call on hold whilst you then dial the second number. Once that person's answered, you can explain why you need their help and then press the conference button again to connect all of the callers. To log out of the T31, click on the button marked Log Out. That will be the one with the green light. That will then log you out of the handset and mean that no calls will come through to your extension number.
To log into the user console, you'll need to log into our single sign-on window. To do that, open up a new browser window, and Surgery Connect is compatible with everything except Internet Explorer. So I have a new Google page open here. I'm going to click into the address bar up at the top. If I then start typing in our single sign-on, it's sso.x-onweb.com. That will then take you to a login page where you can then enter your NHS email address and password. If you ever forget your password, you can use the link at the bottom of this login page to reset your password through a link that will be sent to your NHS email address. When logging in, you'll be presented with 4 boxes. So you'll have the user console, support portal, softphone, and voicemail. Everything we need is in the user console. Now that we've logged into the user console, it will bring you to a screen that looks like this. You'll see calls on the left-hand side of the screen, and these will be all the inbound and outbound calls through the practice. Calls are color-coded, so when they're inbound, they will show in green, outbound will show in blue, and any queuing calls will show as red in the calls list. It will identify the queue for your particular practice on the screen, so you'll be able to see which queue that call is in. Any calls in white are completed calls, and next to each completed call is the call recording for that particular call. Standard users on the system only have access to their own calls, whereas supervisors on the system have access to all calls for the practice. Calls can be searched and sorted using the icons at the top of the applet here. We currently have 1 page of calls, and the calls down at the bottom would span a 24-hour period. I know it's 24 hours because we have a little lightning strike here showing me I'm on my most recent calls, and that covers a 24-hour period. If I were to move to the archive calls button just next to it, that would give me calls over 24 hours, up to 3 years old when you've been with us for a 3-year period. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have the users. On my screen, the users are split up into groups. The members of those groups are the team members that would answer calls around that particular query. I can search, sort, and filter my groups and my users using the icons at the top of the applet. The blue person indicates that I'm on my internal user list, And if I were to move to the directory on the end, that would be my central directory, where I would not only have internal numbers for the practice, but also any external numbers that were useful across the practice as well. If I want to search a user, I can click on the magnifying glass at the top of the user applet and then type in their name into the search box. That will then bring up the details for the particular user that I've searched, in this case, Joe Grant. Joe answers calls on behalf of appointments, pharmacy and secretaries. So if I wanted to call Joe, I could ring her on her extension number, which is 220. Picking up my desk phone and dialing the number will put me through to Joe. If I didn't mind who I spoke to in the appointments team, however, I could ring 301. That will then ring the appointments team and will go through to whoever is next available to answer that call. Now that I have Joe's contact details on the screen, I don't even have to dial the number on my desk phone if I don't want to. If I click on Joe's name, it will then bring up a call button. And if I click on call, that will call whichever device it is that I'm using to make and receive my calls. So if I've logged in the practice, it will ring my desk phone. When I answer my desk phone, it will then place the call to 220 as I've requested on the screen. And I can do exactly the same thing with my appointments number too. I click on the 301 for appointments, it will give me a call 301. Clicking on that button will call my desk phone, and when I answer my desk phone, it will then place the call to 301 as I've requested on the screen. I move to the directory on the end. That will then bring up, as well as my internal numbers, a list of external numbers that may be useful to the practice. I can search the directory using the icons at the top of the applet. If I click in the search box and then search for a listing within the directory, and when I see the one that I want, I can click on it. That will bring the number up on the screen, so I could pick up my desk phone and dial the number manually, or I can just click on call, which will then ring my desk phone. I'll pick up my desk phone, and then it will place the call to John Jones at St Mary's as I've requested on the screen. When a patient call comes through, Surgery Connect will contact your clinical database to see if you have any patients matching the inbound calling number. If it does, when you answer a call, you will be asked if you want to move over into that patient's record in your clinical database. If the system finds more than one patient, it will bring up a pop-up on your screen that looks like this. It's normally in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and will show the inbound calling number that Surgery Connect has checked against the clinical database. We also know that this number dialed in last 9 days ago, and when they spoke to somebody, spoke to Dr. Stephen. When you answer the call, it could either be George or Lucille, as both of these patients have this contact number on their clinical record. So when you answer the call, you'll need to work out which patient we need to speak about. You then have their date of birth so that you can do a DPA check. And when you're happy, just click on the patient name within the pop-up, and that will take you straight into the clinical database, loading up that patient's details straight away for you. When calling patients, if you're in the practice with the integration software running in the background, you can call a patient directly from the clinical record. With the patient active on the screen in front of you, you can use your keyboard to make the call by pressing Ctrl, Shift and H to dial their home number, or Ctrl, Shift and M to dial the patient's mobile number. This works like click to call, so we'll call your desk phone. When you answer your desk phone, it will then connect you to the patient's number on whichever number you've requested. Alternatively, at the bottom of the screen will be an orange circle in your taskbar, usually next to your browser. Whilst in the clinical database with the patient active, if you click on the orange circle, it will then bring up a pop-up that will confirm the current patient that you're viewing. You will have different tabs, but on the contact tab, you'll have the patient numbers. You can now either dial that number manually or use the click to call technology by clicking on the call button on the screen to connect with your desk phone and then call the patient once you've answered that device. At the end of the call, you may also get a pop-up that will ask you if you want to associate that call to the patient's record. Clicking on yes We'll put a timestamp onto the clinical database saying that there has been a call on this date and time, and the call recording will then be saved in the call log on the integration software. Now that we've logged into the user console, we need to tell the system which phone we'd like to make and receive our calls on. Use your initials in the top right-hand corner of the screen. When you click on your initials, you'll be given your contact details. So this is my extension number on the training database, and these are the numbers that I could send my calls to. If you're logging in manually into the phone or using your NHS smart card, it will default to the work number. So if you're logged in the practice, you don't need to do this. However, if you would like your calls to come through a PC or laptop and use the Softphone on the screen to interact with them, or if you need to forward your calls to your own personal mobile or landline number, this is where you would need to do it. Before you can forward calls to any personal numbers, you'll need to speak to the practice manager to have those numbers added onto your user profile. If I'm working remotely, I can also change my status from here. So I can make myself do not disturb, which will turn me orange in the users list for everyone to be able to see. Or I can click onto outbound calls if I have a list of patients to call. That will turn me purple in the user list and mean that I can make as many outbound calls as I need to, accessing the clinical database in between times, but I won't be interrupted by any inbound calls into my extension number, either directly into my extension number through an internal call, or if I'm part of the group that takes inbound calls from patients. From the user console, you can access the dialer by clicking on the phone icon near your initials. That will bring the dialer up on the screen. If you've selected to use the system through a Softphone, the dialer will dial out through a PC or laptop. You can then interact with that call using a USB headset. When dialing a number, you can press the numbers on the screen using the mouse, or you can click into the box and type the number in using your keyboard, and even copy and paste. So if I have this number elsewhere, I can dial the number without having to type it in. When I click on the green phone, that will begin an audio call. The system will call out the number that we've typed in, and as soon as that person answers, the screen changes to a fully functioning phone. So I now have a mute button so I can mute my microphone, a hold button so I can put the caller on hold and play music. I can transfer from here, and so long as we're all logged into Surgery Connect, it doesn't matter where anyone's working. If I want to transfer internally, I can use an internal number for an individual or for the team if I don't mind who I speak to. I also have my video option here. So if I want to convert this to a video call, clicking on the video link will ask if I want to send the caller a text message. Clicking on send will automatically send a text message to the number that you've dialed. And when the patient receives that text, they can click yes, they're happy to use their camera, and yes, they'd like to begin a video call. Your audio call will then automatically drop and the video call will begin. You can then answer the call, which will come directly to you. Whilst using the Softphone, if the patient doesn't want their call recording, you'd need to use the keypad to pause the recording. Keying *5 will pause the recording, and *5 again will resume the recording. Just like your desk phones, if you don't start the recording by the end of the call, your next call will be recorded automatically. If you have calls forwarded to your mobile, you won't have a transfer button on your keypad, but you can use *7 on the keypad to begin a transfer. The instructions will be given to you when you dial *7 to dial the number that you want to go through to. You can then dial internally or enter externally, and the phone will then ring. When you're ready to put the call through, press the hash key. To change how the screen is displayed, click on the menu button next to your initials. Within the menu, you'll need to click in Settings. That will then allow you to change the appearance of the screen, changing to a 50-50 split if you'd rather. And in the stats boxes, will allow you to turn on or off individual boxes, or if you don't want to see them at all, click on Show Panel at the top to remove all the boxes from the screen. You can also move the Softphone around through the menu. I keep mine in the bottom right hand corner, but you could move it over to the left if you'd rather, or down to the bottom, even in the middle of the screen. I can also use the Softphone in free mode, particularly useful if I'm thinking about setting up a video call. When I click into free mode, it means that I can move the bar anywhere on the screen by dragging on the four-way cross. I can also maximize the phone to make it a full screen version. This way, when I dial a number and connect the call, if I'm converting to a video call, it will be a full screen image rather than the cutout in the corner that you would normally get with the Softphone. To resize the phone, use the two arrows at the top right hand corner of the screen. A little bit of admin for you to do the first time that you log in. If you can come into the menu, into Settings and Other, and change the session idle timeout from the 30 minutes that it defaults to up to 10 hours. That will mean the web page will stay in the background all day if it needs to, but if you need it for the last call of the day, it will be able to respond quickly. To log out, click on your initials in the top right hand corner of the user console and change your status to logged out. That will stop any calls coming through either through the Softphone, on your mobile, or through your desk phone. You can then use the logout section in the menu to close down the windows for both the user console and the single sign-on window.